Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing another kind of interview slash hangout session with Ingrid Braun, who is a friend slash powerlifter who I had met during my days at Frostburg State University in college. And, she has a plethora of experience both in the gym and through powerlifting that I think would be valuable for you all to hear and kind of hear her experience. So, without further ado, Ingrid, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Like Tristan said, I'm Ingrid Braun. I've been competing since I think 2018 and 2017. And I did some weight training or powerlifting classes when I was in high school. So I officially started doing the big three movements like back in 2013. So it's almost 10 years. I think this fall
decade
my
mark.
official 10 years of like doing a squat, bench, and deadlift, which I didn't think about until just now.
Right, yeah. You can finally tell people I have been doing this for a decade, which that carries some weight.
Yeah, I guess so. But so I guess the summer of my freshman year of college, so I went to Frostburg State University with Tristan, and that summer I had joined a new gym that had a powerlifting club. And so I started a 5-3-1 program. And then about a month before my meet, I met Tristan at the gym. He was working out next to me. And I walked up to him and I'm like, "What program are you doing?" Not realizing that most people don't do, or most people at your level of lifting have personalized coaching. And so anyway, from there, you helped me prepare for my first meet, and then trained me or worked with me for, I think, 2.5, 3 years, I think. And
yeah,
then,
that sounds about right.
And we did 2 collegiate nationals, which was a grand old time. Unfortunately, I just missed doing a third one because I graduated.
Yeah, that was COVID, right?
No,
that was
I graduated December 2019, and they don't count since collegiate nationals is in the spring. I couldn't compete in my last senior year.
Gotcha.
Nationals, but
and I think that year it got canceled as well. So I mean, if there's a bright side to be taken from that, at least you didn't miss out on much. They were like, Ingrid's not coming, have to cancel it.
Right, yeah. And then beyond that, I graduated up and started training with Bill McCarthy, Get the Lift. So we're teammates, and I've been working with him since, I think, 2019.
Yeah, I think it was after that collegiate nationals. I think you joined up with him, right?
Yeah, and then I went to Raw Nats in 2019 as well and competed as a junior. Competed as a junior. But as far as that goes, since then, I've just been rolling with the punches. COVID hit. That was a big deal for everybody who was used to going to a gym. And so I made the switch to working out at home, as many people did, but I didn't go back for quite a while, and I've established a nice home gym, and so
yeah.
But I just did my most. Oops, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm curious because I was someone who also managed to panic and like get some things for a home gym during the COVID situation, and whenever things open back up, I made the decision to start going back to the gym, and I just kind of found like that separation of like that small gap of either walking to the gym or driving to the gym kind of helped me turn that corner of like, okay, this is training time. And I
Mhm.
was at home, I would drift into like, oh, I can throw in a load of laundry between sets, or, let me start cooking dinner. I'm just doing accessories. So I'm curious how your experience, like, how do you stay focused during that home gym time?
Um, well, one, I made the choice to stay at home. Um, well, one, I was living with my parents, and my dad was or has some autoimmune issues. So even when the gyms opened, it was my desire to go back. However,
Mm.
my living situation made that not an option. So if you would have asked me back then, I was still pretty upset about not being able to go back. Um, but over time, I've come to like the freedom, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, and also, working out at home means that I can blast whatever music I want. I have funky music tastes. I don't have to worry about um, I don't have to worry about commuting. For example, right now I have about a 50-minute commute, and if I had to come home, drive another 30 minutes or 10, 15 minutes, that adds to the amount of available time I have where in the evenings I can just walk out to the garage or wherever my gym setup is. Um, I'm pretty good though at staying there. Like once I am in workout mode, I'm pretty good at just staying there. Um, and I don't know what that is about it. I think part of it is that my home gym was never set up in a really accessible place.
Hmm.
When I set up at my family's house, the they have a barn. That was where I first set up my stuff. And so I still had like a little pre-ritual. I have to get on shoes and walk to the barn. And then I have the whole setup where I open the barn door so that I have some light coming in. And um, so there are still some little rituals that I can do, even though my commute is 100 feet or something like that. But, I think it would be a different situation if your gym was in your living room or
Hmm.
if it was in your office or your bedroom, because that is really close and really accessible. Where for me to walk from the barn or um, the the gym was most recently set up in my parents' like on a back patio. It was
Hmm.
still it
Was it
was
covered?
it was covered for a while. Um,
Okay.
so the barn was no longer available. It got its rightful use of housing a big camper, extensive camper, that took priority, and so I moved my stuff temporarily in the winter time to the screen porch, and then
Hmm.
once the weather started getting nice, I felt guilty about using up an entertainment space, and so there was a little concrete pad, and I had purchased a pop-up pavilion, and so that provided me shade. And if the weather wasn't fabulous, if it was like raining lightly, I could get away with
Hmm.
working outside. However, the wind took it from me,
Oh.
so it flew away one too many times. And so at some point, I just trashed it, and um, then became the difficulty of working with the weather, and that it's not necessarily safe to be squatting during a thunderstorm, or if it's
Yeah.
gripping, how am I going to grip the bench or that kind of stuff. So it really did shift some of my training days. So I just had to be flexible with whatever I had.
Mm-hmm.
But,
And well, I guess what I'm getting from this is anyone who has some sort of commercial gym to lift in should not be complaining about the equipment in that gym. Because
yeah.
at least they do not have to worry about thunderstorms and the weather.
Yeah. Yeah. No, my fiance Dylan and I just purchased our first home, and one of our non-negotiables when searching for a home was, where are we going to put the home gym?
Mm-hmm.
So either a basement with tall ceilings or a detached garage or an attached garage. We really didn't care. Or a big enough bedroom that we could use the space that with all the equipment we wanted. And so we were able to get a home with a detached garage, and we've
Mm-hmm.
just set it up this past weekend. So this will be like the first time in a while where I'll be lifting underneath the roof, where I won't have to play the weather game. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned the concrete pad that was on a decline. So for a long time, like almost 3 months, my bench was really struggling, and I couldn't really
Mm-hmm.
figure out why. Until one day I just shoved an extra mat, like horse stall mat, underneath the front of the bench or the bottom of the bench only, just so that it was a little bit more level. And that made
Yeah.
a really big difference. So, but again, I just worked with what I had, and, there's only a certain way I could deadlift. I couldn't deadlift facing downhill. The bar just wanted to go.
Yeah.
And making sure that I was squatting in a way that wasn't gonna put me off balance.
Mm-hmm.
Now everything should be fine now. It's like I'm lifting in a commercial gym, just without AC.
Right. And I mean, hey, who needs the AC anyway, right?
Yeah. But I am a firm believer of like training on poor equipment or
Mm-hmm.
poor circumstances just makes your meet days in so much better, because you've trained for worst case scenario often. And so
Yeah.
I think something that we did in college was the training equipment that we had access to was fine. It
Mm-hmm.
it allowed us to make all the gains and to work out, but it wasn't competition equipment. It wasn't competition bars necessarily, unless you brought your own. And so we would go to find a gym that had nice equipment. So we'd go down to Chiseled and
Mm-hmm.
get to practice on the good stuff. But hey, you've been doing most of your training volume on the not so great bench. So if comes competition time and the bench there is not so great, you can adapt. You've trained to adapt to that. So
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. And I was talking to someone over the weekend, like through social media as well. They had made a comment, uh, just how I don't train on competition specific equipment. I think they had seen I posted just like a story or something where I had gotten stuck in the rack, and I notoriously do this every time at my gym squat rack. Like I get stuck on one side, and I agree that is not ideal. Um, but there is a camp in like the powerlifting community who like will not train on non-competition equipment. Like it is a big deal for them that they're on kilograms. plates and, a combo rack. And to me, I think that is, like you said, setting yourself up to find something wrong on meet day. Because, like, if you're training in this perfect environment, you're preparing for a perfect meet environment. If it's like something is slightly off, maybe it's they're not using the right power bar that you've been using in the warm-up room, or like
Yeah.
they've got some pound plates in the warm-up room. I've seen that at nationals before, like,
Yeah.
with some overflow, they have pound plates. If you're used to training on the perfect setup, that can get in your head. And then it becomes excuses. And, so I'm definitely a fan of, like, just train. And then when you get to the meet, you'll be like, this is perfect.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
My fiance Dylan, he's not completely in the camp of it needs to be perfect, but he does prefer to use the nicer equipment, the kilos, and
Hmm.
having the right bar. And I totally get it. But also part of me is like nitty gritty, just do it. Like, it's just iron, like whatever, just lift it. And actually during COVID, you graciously gifted me or let me borrow, I don't have it, the
Yeah, it's yours.
a barbell that didn't stand the test of your strength, but it was just fine for
Oh,
mine.
yeah.
So I lifted on a bent barbell for a long time because barbells were out of stock. Were very
Yeah, I
long.
remember when you picked that up, and I think I was still like, I might have been in the middle of taking a USAPL coaching course, which
Mm.
still to this day is probably the worst investment of my life. I promptly left USAPL, and it's like an 8-hour course, but it is what it is. But I remember you sneaking in to grab that bar. But when you say it was bent, I just want to make sure the listeners know it was not a little bend. It was like a buffalo bar type bend to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? I did it. I did it, and that's all I had
Yeah.
access to, and it was fabulous because it let me do what I wanted to do, what I was hungry to do, because I had already spent probably 4 months not training at all or training um, body weight movements, doing more
Hmm.
uh, what I had access to, which wasn't much. Um, but at the same time as working out with that buffalo bar or Duffalo. Is it buffalo or Duffalo?
Okay, so I think, and this is a great debate, because I'm not 100% sure. So I think the buffalo bar is the name for a bar that is purposefully bent like that.
Mhm.
But the Duffalo bar is the buffalo bar that is made by Chris Duffin. So, like,
Uh,
it's a specific brand of buffalo bar.
okay.
Um, I don't know. The bent
Well,
bar, we'll call it
yeah,
that
the
one.
bent bar. That's also when I got my back injury. Um, so for me, lifting with a bent bar just meant that I was benching with a bent bar. And I was doing some squat movements and like really no deadlift movements. So for me at that time, it really wasn't the worst situation. I mean, it affected me slightly, but I mean,
Yeah.
it was better than nothing.
Yeah. And okay, I'm deciding which way I want to go because I have two good questions and they go kind of in opposite directions. But I guess we'll start with your back injury because that's a good segue there. I know you had some back discomfort like when we worked together in college. Was it like back then? I remember thinking it was a sciatic issue. Like whenever you use volume with back exercises, it seemed like it would bother you. Can you kind of elaborate on how that evolved?
Yeah, so, and I didn't even really think about my back struggles in college as being the same thing. They felt really different. So
Okay.
I would characterize my like back pain and in college more as I just felt like I got a back pump super fast, and it would take a while for it to dissipate. And I don't really struggle with that anymore. I don't really know what happened, necessarily what changed, but it's just not something that's on my radar. So
Hmm.
I don't have a great explanation for that. But the back pain that I struggled with in the last 3 years, I would say I'm out of it now. But
Oh, that's great.
in 2020, I worked as a oyster hatchery technician, and it's a labor job. I mean, you're throwing 35-pound oyster bags around, 50-pound boxes of salt. Like it's just a
Oh,
labor job every day, in and out. It was a great experience, but some of the tasks there were not well balanced for the amount of staff that we had. So I ended up hurting my back. And that was in May of 2020.
okay.
And so that kind of coincided with taking time off from lifting with the pandemic. So I didn't have access to equipment, but also I was trying to heal. Unfortunately, I was still required to do all the labor tasks that hurt my back in the first place. I still had to do those, so I couldn't rest fully. And I think that's probably why my back injury lasted so long, because it wasn't until I left that position that I started seeing progress. I did go to
Hmm.
PT for like 6 months because they thought that it was glute issues, like tight glutes, you're not doing enough mobility.
Yeah.
And the problem was like I was strong. So, um, excuse my dog barking. But so I was strong. So all my strength was there. It was just like I couldn't tie my shoes because that involved
Ah,
bending my lower back. And so everything revolved around it. And part of stretching and doing physical therapy for stretching out your glutes is a lot of bending your lower back. And after
hmm.
6 months of training of physical therapy, my chiropractor had finally said, okay, we need to get you an MRI because you should be seeing progress. He's like,
Hmm.
all the indicators, your flexibility is there. I don't see anything, the reason why. And the MRI results ended up showing me that I had a bulge disc. And you know what they say for bulge
Oh.
disc? Don't bend it. And I had spent 6 months bending it on purpose and bending it
Mm.
during my job. So that was really a tough time because I felt kind of like I'm not going to leave this job early,
Hmm.
even though that would probably be what would have helped me sooner. But I only had a 10-month contract, so it was just like counting down the days. Just got to get through it.
Yeah.
And once I stopped going to PT, I did get what are they called? They're the shots that they give you.
Cortisone shot?
Yes, yeah. I did get two. I got 2 sets of those, and neither of them really worked for me.
Okay. Where did they inject those for a disc?
They inject it next to the disc from when I'm in my L4
Okay.
and L5 were bulged. So,
Okay.
and they do it like they do one and then one treatment, and then a couple months later, like 2 or 3 months later, they'll do another one. But the whole process actually, they numb you, but you're sore still after. So I just felt like by the time that I was done being sore from them injecting it, I was still, I had no difference in pain. So I just stopped doing
Yeah.
that. That contract ended. And then it was like a breath of fresh air. I didn't have to do manual labor, and I could be really strategic with my workouts and my trainings and making sure that I'm
Hmm.
actually avoiding causing stress to that area. And I'll say we did the very, 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 very low, slow process of building back up. And for me, I worked with Bill and we figured out what
Hmm.
I was comfortable with. And eventually I could start squatting. And I squatted 95 pounds some weeks and slowly, slowly built it up. Then introduced RDLs. I had
Hmm.
RDL'd for, I think I started the RDLs in 20 early 2021,
Hmm.
and I did not deadlift from the floor until like 3 months before my meet, most recent meet. I RDL'd
Yeah.
for so long, and that was
That's
the
over
only
a
thing.
year. How long is that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's because it worked. It allowed me,
Right. Yeah.
with the equipment that I had, to focus on my hamstrings, build up my lower back, and
Hmm.
I mean, it was slow, slow work. And it was also volume work too. A lot of the times I was doing 4x10s. Um, and then as the weight increased, we drop it to maybe 4x6s. But for a long time, it was like 4x10s. And every week, just linear
Yeah.
progression. Just keep, as long as I'm comfortable, as long as I'm able to handle the workload. Um, and I think I had, over the last 2 years, I had signed up for, I think, 2 separate meets. One was a full power meet. That was because I got super excited because I was feeling really good. And then things started taking, I
Hmm.
had jumped the gun. I was a little bit too eager. So I pulled out of that meet and then decided to do a bench only meet. Um, and that was fabulous. I loved doing a bench only meet. It gave me
Yeah.
all of the thrill and the purpose in training to get on the platform again and give me a taste of what all those uh, all the little squats and little deadlifts or lightweight or a lot of variations to work on different parts of the movement. It just gave all of that, like, just reignited the fire for it. So,
Yeah.
and I did my most recent meet
That's
in March this year. And that was my first full power meet since 2019 raw mats.
yeah. And right. So basically, we'll call it 3 years and 3 months ish. Right. That's most people I feel like would have given up at that point. I think it's safe to say.
Yeah. For me, the part that I struggled with the most early on was that
Oh,
I felt like every time I
might be
went
having a little
online,
connection.
is it better now?
On the screen, I think, to lower the frame rate, maybe.
Okay.
Give it just a second. Okay, can you hear me all right? It looks like your video is a little better.
Yeah, I can hear you. You sound better too.
Okay, cool. That's the good thing about these kind of just laid back things. We can just be like, well, poor connection, continue. But I think you were talking about, I had said after 3 years, I think most people would have given up at that point, you know. So I'm curious. You had said, you know, we're hitting the decade mark of your powerlifting journey. Um, what has kept you motivated and kind of driven through those times? Like some people are very competition motivated. Some people are driven by records. Some people just like to lift weights and happen to compete too. What's kind of your thing?
That's a great question. I think for me, routine is a big part of it, but so I'd say like I don't have a great routine of like, okay, every Tuesday I do my workout or every Thursday I do a workout, but I have the built-in routine of I am getting these workouts done this week. And it's just like, just got to keep doing it because for me, I get sucked into like the never-ending loop of, oh, this feels hard. Maybe I don't want to do it. Or you get into that point, but I'm like, but the only way that this doesn't feel hard is if I do it. And it's like, sometimes if I get off the track, so say if I go on a vacation or say if I have a pre-existing shoulder injury, excuse me. Sorry. Someone had to talk to the dog.
Oh, that's okay.
So I have a pre-existing other injury, which is my shoulder, which is something that happened in college. And I've worked through that, and sometimes it's great. Sometimes I don't have any issues. And then other days it's just like, wow, I must have slept on this really wrong because this feels rough or it's really lagging whenever I bench. Like you can tell that my left arm shoots up before my right. And it's not consistently bad. And I've gone to physical therapy for it and stuff. So right now I'm just at a rolling with the punches, but the dang, I was going somewhere with that.
We were talking about just like motivations.
Oh yeah.
For the competing.
Just to get better, you just have to do it, even though it's hard. And the time that like if you get knocked off course, those first few weeks coming back are tough, but that's the only way. You just have to get through. And so I just think about okay, if I don't love how this is feeling, or if I don't love how fast I moved this weight this week, the only way that I'm going to do better and feel better about this is if I just keep going. And if I just, it's not fun or it doesn't feel great, but one day it will feel great. And I just got to get to that point. I'd also say that throughout those 3 years, I had a really good support system between Bill, my coach, and Dylan, my fiance. He is also a powerlifter. And so his support throughout the entirety of it, I mean, I can't say enough good things about having somebody with like that shared goal. So that's a hobby that one we can do together. So that's an activity that you, but also he's somebody that I can confide in, and he understands like what my limitations are, or like, or he can tell when I'm like not having a good lift, or, and so just having a support system. And I know a lot of people can get that online. And I'll say for me, I've gone more offline ever since my injury, purely because I felt like I was comparing myself to a lot of people who said they had a bulged disc and they were back in a month. And that was really hard for me to look at because I was doing the slow progress of I'm not rushing this. It's not worth it. This is a life support. Like I want to do this for a long time. I'm not in a rush. And knowing that I'm competitive, but also I'm in a different age class now. I'm in the open. It's a different playing field. So I don't necessarily think I have any reason to rush. I mean, when I was competitive in college, it was because I was a junior. So I was competing against people my age, and it was a much smaller pool. So now it's just like, I'm not going to, pushing or rushing is not going to actually get me there to where I want to be faster. I mean, so, yeah, but a support system, because Dylan, if I don't want to work out one day, he's like, well, when are you going to do it? Or, like, I'll hang out with you while you do it, or, and just be.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. But.
Yeah. And I can agree with the age class change. You know, I felt that myself whenever I finally got out of junior and collegiate classes. Like, those years felt like a race for some reason. Like, it was like, I have to do this, this, and this before I hit this age cutoff. And then, like, open swallows me whole. But once you get there, it's like, like, I can kind of breathe for a second. And you look around at so many great lifters, some that come to mind, like L.S. McLean, Jennifer Thompson, you know, Susie Hartwick Gary. All of those are like older lifters. Mike Tuchscherer, you know, this year made his comeback. And all of those lifters have been doing it for so long. And it's like compounding of training, and not necessarily even ideal training. It's just like, you know, getting under the bar, not injuring yourself too much and doing too many stupid things. And like, eventually it's just inevitable that you get really strong from that process. And I think sometimes with social media, like you mentioned, you went offline. I think some of that online culture is like, now, you know, like, let me see your top set now. Let me see your singles all the time, rather than like sets of 12, which might not be that exciting to watch, but they're just as important, if not more important, than the stuff that Instagram likes to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, for me, I just kept comparing myself to other people, especially because when you're injured and you're not able to do the sport you want to do, you are hungry for answers. You look online, you watch YouTube videos of what can I do, or you look at other people who say that they had a bulge disc, but their recovery was a different timeline than yours. It was a different injury, or so many different factors. But so for me, I just felt like being on social media during my recovery process, it just made me want to rush it even more. And I didn't need to rush what I was doing. And I felt pretty content actually with not rushing for the most of it. And especially in the last year, as I started getting stronger and I started realizing, I was like, oh, this was something I would have done. This is a weight that I would have hit in prep for a meet, like my senior year of college. And being able to slowly work towards it. And also at this point, now that I'm not necessarily comparing myself to many people on the injury scale, like now I used to use Instagram as my training log. And I just post every single workout. I posted it up there, and it was part of my, like, I've closed this workout out by posting it and reflecting on it and going through that whole process. And now I just don't do that really much. And sometimes I feel sort of guilty about it, purely because there is a community online of really great powerlifting people, and there are far more women in the sport than there were when I started. When I started my Instagram, It was like bodybuilding was how you, like, was a lot of the content out there. And it shifted a lot. There are a lot of strong people. So now maybe I just don't feel the pressure to create the content, maybe just consume it, but also just taking it easy with comparing yourself, because knowing that my recovery could take 3 years. I don't know if many people want to hear that. But I'm sure there are some people that maybe are on year 2. They're still hurting. They're still working through it. That it would be good for them to hear. But
yeah, I think that's why this is, I think, important to kind of get your story out a little bit, and let's share the realism of, like, life and powerlifting and dealing with this injury, because someone, like you said, could be 2 years in and feeling discouraged because they haven't been able to figure this injury out, and they see you talk about it and they're like, oh, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe I'm just on the longer end of the recovery spectrum. So I think that's good to shed some light on, like, the reality of some things. Like, I was 2019 that I would say it can't compare to what you were talking about with your back injury, but it was that similar frustrating feeling of, like, I didn't know what it was, and I thought it was a ligament, but I kept having meets that I had to do. Like, it started in June, I competed in August, October, and then finally I was, like, fed up with it. I went to the doctor, and they, like, I was like, I need an MRI. I know it's a ligament, just, like, do it so that we can figure out what's wrong. And they were like, whoa, you have to get like 2 or 3 weeks before the Arnold 20th. We'll get an X-ray before the MRI. And they called me back and they were like, yeah, you have a broken clavicle. I was like, oh, that's why it's hurt for so long. But it was like that helpless feeling because I thought one thing was wrong, and like I was so sure it was an AC joint that, and like everything I looked at was like, oh, it'll heal in, this timeline, and it just wasn't. And then turns out it was something totally different that had to heal another way. So um, patience through those injuries, and that's something that you know I didn't share with a ton of people. So everyone looking online for their shoulder injuries, they're not going to come across that. Just like your back injury, those are just two, far tail end recovery periods, which it sucks, but that's what we do as powerlifters sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. But
Yeah. I'm not gonna keep you too long. I know it's getting a little late, but I did have one more kind of point if you've got maybe like 10 more minutes left.
sure.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on because competition mindset. So a lot of what we've talked about has been training and dealing with adversity there, but you are one of the best competitors that I've met, like of people I've lifted with on a regular basis. You execute
Aw.
on lifts better than anyone that I can think of. And, it's a compliment and you should take it. But whenever I
Oh.
think about people like executing on the platform, uh, you do it as well as anyone as far as like not making stupid mistakes. You may miss a lift here or there on strength as we all do, but there's something to be said about consistency. So I'm kind of curious what you have in your head or like what's going on through your mind on game day to keep yourself level and consistent.
Well, I will thank you so much for the compliment. That it warms my heart that you think that of me. I love meet days. They're my favorite, and I think they're everybody's favorite. However, I think I've always been kind of timid and quiet when it comes to meet days, kind of like a sleeper agent or something like that, where I'm not very aggressive when it comes to my lifts. Like I don't grunt or yell or do a whole bunch. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with it. It's just, it doesn't feel natural to me. And I know it feels natural for some people. You're exerting that energy. I get it, but that's just not me. So when I get to meet days, I just trust the process with everything I have because there's nothing that I can do really that's going to change whether or not I can lift, get that third squat or that last deadlift. Like it's just time to do and to execute. And for me, I just like to stay aware of what's kind of going on. Like I'll put a headphone in maybe, but I'm not one that needs to like get lost in it. But I also I super enjoy the whole process. Like I love cheering people on before me and after me and high-fiving people in the back and making it light
Yep.
because a lot of times lifting is really emotional. You spend a lot of time working towards that one day and then it's over. So might as well have fun. And I also, part of trusting the process is also trusting what your coaches give you. And that's also something I take into training, that my coach is not going to give me something that I can't handle or something that's unreasonable. And I also have the mindset of, I would rather have a good meet day and not PR my total or go conservative on a lift based on how I'm actually feeling, than go a step beyond, take something that I'm really unsure of, because for me that I think it could mess up the whole day for me. This last meet, I missed my last bench. I was taking 192.9, which would have been a PR. And I got called for downward movement, which is the first time that I've ever failed a bench or got, I think, even a single red light. And that's something for me. Like, I definitely like playing it safe, and that just makes me more confident, because there's always the next meet that I can push it a little more. And so, I don't know. I just leave a little bit on the table each time, knowing that I'm going to come back and eat it eventually. So.
Yeah. And I like that mindset, because sometimes you hear a couple different camps. Some people say to like try and match your PR, go really hard on your second attempt, and then to try and get a little bit more on your third, which to me always felt like you were like setting yourself up to go 6 for 9 almost every time. Just because those thirds are like such question marks if you set it up that way, versus the way you're talking about, be more conservative, go 9 for 9, or have the intent to go 9 for 9. Because some people, they think of it like, if you make all 9 lifts, you didn't try hard enough. Well, I kind of still, it's like you said, it's a long-term game. So why would you set yourself up, like, let's be honest, it's fun to make lifts. So why would you plan to not make some lifts in the meet?
Yeah, and definitely I also have sort of like a pride thing of like, I would rather do the lifts really well than fail. Because at the end of the day, like, if the lift doesn't count, the lift doesn't count. But and I guess at some point I also just think like, okay, well, where are my relative? Like, this meet that I did in March, I was only 7.5 kilos under my best ever meet. And that's kind of crazy. I'm really proud of that. And yeah, it took me 3 years to get onto the platform, but I left a ton on the platform for squat. And that motivates me. The fact that I left something on the platform and that I did it, that fuels my fire of, oh, it's going to be so good when I go back and I actually can feel my potential and I can actually get closer to that potential limit. But I'd also say, like, I'm an emotional lifter. I cry when I make a lift. I cry when I miss a lift. Like, there's just a lot going on. It's a really exciting day. And so, no, I'm excited to get back to the platform again, but I probably won't do that until maybe early next year. Just give myself the time. But I mean,
training, and like you said, no rush.
Right. Yep. And then I'll maybe I can hit a 198 bench by the time I go back and really redeem myself from the 193. But
Yeah. And hey, good on you for not saying, because it would be really tempting to be like, well, maybe I'll hit a 203 bench because it's so close to that magic 200 mark. But good on you for being like 198 first.
yeah, I think also part of my mentality is I always downplay. I don't necessarily do it intentionally, but I always downplay my ability when it comes down to it. And so the people around me sometimes can see my potential more than I can. And that's where trusting my coach comes in, because if I programmed myself, I probably wouldn't say, oh yeah, do a 308 deadlift single. I probably wouldn't tell myself to do that. But because somebody is programming, Bill gives me that number, he believes that I can do it, because he's not going to set me up to fail on a training day, much less on a meet day. So if Bill thinks that I can do it, I'm doing it. And that helps a lot with the mentality part. It's like, shoot low, or what is it? Shoot low, and I can't remember what the saying is, but essentially, if you underestimate yourself, you're always surprised.
I've heard. There you go. I was gonna say shoot for the stars and hit the moon, but I think that's actually the inverse one.
Yeah, I think so.
But
well, I have
you
an
get the point, right? Everybody.
Bill is always reasonable. I always think I can't do it, and Dylan thinks I can always do more. So I have a
perfect. So, like, yeah.
Funny.
Well, it's like finding a spot from a satellite, right? You need 3 satellites to triangulate a point on the GPS. There you go. You have your 3 satellites.
Yep. And for meet days, that works, because we'll find it eventually. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a good spot to wrap it up. We're about to hit that hour mark. But thank you for taking the time and coming on and kind of sharing your story. I think there's a lot of value that people can get from seeing you with a decade in, all of the adversity, the ups and downs, so I think that's inspirational. And is there anything else that you kind of want to close off with, where people could follow you?
Oh, yeah. Well, one, thank you so much for having me on the show. I mean, I had a great time, and it was good to catch up with you and everything. But the Instagram that I hardly use is Braun Fitness. And I'm usually on Instagram, and maybe I'll start posting a little bit more now that I'm in my own gym setup. It'll be more natural, I guess.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, with that, thank you everybody for tuning in. And if you made it this far, you all are champs. And, thank you, Ingrid. I'm going to close down the recording, but it won't kick us both out. So we can say actual goodbyes here in a second. But, yep, thank you, everybody. And until next time, happy lifting. All right, if I can get the end recording button to work, that would be marvelous.